The replication crisis is an ongoing methodological crisis in the social sciences and medicine. Most psychological knowledge comes from studies that found some phenomenon to be true. Recently, researchers have been trying to confirm the old findings by replicating the old studies. Many of these replication studies, however, failed to find any evidence of the phenomena that have long been believed to be true. A 2015 paper published in Science reported that from 100 replications of previous studies, only 36% were able to find a statistically significant effect. This poses serious questions to the validity of a large part of psychological knowledge. The replication crisis has been called possibly the most important problem in psychology. But what caused the replication crisis, and how can it be avoided in future? The most commonly stated reasons are that small effects are very hard to measure, that many mistakes are done in the analyses, both intentionally and unintentionally, and that negative results are often not published. The recommendations that arise from these findings are that we should combine the results from multiple studies, publish not only the results but also the data and analyses, and pre-register studies. The last two are sometimes called the open science conventions. I will focus primarily on combining the results from multiple studies. The common ways of doing this are with a meta-analysis, a Bayesian meta-analysis, or a pooled analysis. All of them combine data from multiple studies, for example studies that analyzed if dogs cause joy. These approaches, however, require the studies to be identical, which is almost never the case. Also, there mostly aren't many similar studies. Therefore, there often are not enough studies for really gaining any value from a meta-analysis. I would like to present a new approach to meta-analysis called the agent-based modeling approach to Bayesian meta-analysis. It is not restricted to study data, but can include most other datasets too. And it is not restricted to data from similar environments, but can use data from a diverse range of sources. Statistical analyses in psychology generally only focus on studies, because studies are far easier to analyze than real-world systems. Studies are carefully designed so that only the effect of interest plays a role, and that no other factors influence the observed variable, in this case joy. In the real world, however, many effects take place at the same time. This example shows the influence introducing a dog into a classroom might have on the grades of that class. There can be counteracting effects, such as the joy caused by the dog increasing the concentration, whereas the excitement caused by the dog decreasing the concentration. There can be self-enforcing loops, such as the joy from receiving good grades motivating a better concentration and thus better grades, etc. So how could we learn the amount of joy caused by a dog from such a messy real-world system? Well, for the study it's easy. We can directly read the strength of the effect from the data. For the real-world example it's much harder. The data only tells us if there was a dog in the class and the grades of the classes. We don't know any of the other variables, such as joy, excitement, etc. We could therefore call these other variables hidden or latent variables. So, more concretely, let's say we're interested in the magnitude of the dog-caused increase in joy θ1. This unknown parameter exists in both the study and the real-world example. In the real-world example, there are, however, also many other unknown parameters, because we don't know the exact magnitude and shape of the other effects either. So, what we do is treat the system of effects on the right as one big model and learn all the parameters of this big model at once. Because of the many parameters, the model on the right is much more flexible and the parameters are less constrained as for such a simple model on the left. We will, however, see later that the parameters are not only learned from this one dataset, but from many different datasets. The big advantage of learning from real-world datasets is that there are so many real-world datasets openly available. We can get a better understanding of how much joy a dog causes from many datasets involving dogs and people interacting, of which there are a good few. Here's a depiction of a normal meta-analysis. It achieves a better estimation of the dog-caused increase in joy by combining the results from the two existing studies. With the new form of meta-analysis that I'm presenting, we can not only combine the results from the two studies, but also include the learnings from many other real-world datasets. This allows us to get even more accurate estimations and makes the results more generalizable. What do I mean with more generalizable? Well, for a normal meta-analysis, the included studies have to be very similar. Similar behavior performed in the same type of environment. This, however, gives us a result that is only valid for this specific environment, and does not allow us to generalize to other environments or people. This error of falsely generalizing is called extrapolation error. Unfortunately, it is a very common error in most fields involved with statistics. Another major problem with studies is participant bias. This is the effect that participants who know that they are part of a study often behave differently than they would alone. For example, they often have a tendency to try and please the observers. When including real-world datasets into the meta-analysis, we can reduce both of these problems. The real-world datasets observe the same effect in very different scenarios and environments, thus allowing for much better generalizability. Also, most real-world datasets don't involve participants that are aware of being part of a study. This data thus doesn't suffer under participant bias, allowing for truer results. Let's look at how this new type of meta-analysis can be done in practice with the software Tree of Knowledge. Tree of Knowledge is an online platform for doing Bayesian meta-analysis with help of agent-based models. Agent-based models are simulations of agents such as humans, dogs, etc. They're common in many fields such as city planning, ecology, sociology, and many more. The agents in such simulations have a list of behavior rules that specify how they react in various situations. Ideally, these behavior rules are formulated in such a general way that you can place the agent into any situation and the agent will behave correctly, i.e. as a real human would. With Tree of Knowledge, you can create rules that mimic any behavior. For example, the dog increases joy rule could be specified as, if the current activity is playing with dog, then increase the joy by θ1. At the time of creating the rule, the parameter θ1 is still unknown. Tree of Knowledge is the only agent-based modeling software that allows you to create rules with unknown parameters. All other software require fixed rules. We can also create rules for more complex behavior, for example, multinomial processing trees. In this example, we are modeling the memory retrieval of previously seen objects. With these rules here, we have the unknown parameters p and b. Another example of what we could model is someone's decision process. Here we see a diffusion model created with only 4 simple rules. The diffusion model simulates the decision process of someone choosing to eat ice cream or not. It has the unknown parameters z, v, and a. www.treeofknowledge.ai is a platform where users add behavior rules to agents such as adult, child, and dog. They can then create simulations of different scenarios by combining these agents. We will see next how the platform can learn parameter values by fitting these simulations to real-world data. Let's use the example from before. We have a dataset with grades from various classes, some of which had a dog. If we simulate the same classes, we would hope that the simulation is so good that the simulated classes also get the same grade. Now, the simulation is however not fixed, because the behavior rules of the agents had these unknown parameters. Let's just call the parameters θ1, θ2, etc. The system will automatically learn which parameters produce the most accurate simulation. It does this by running the simulation with different parameter values and seeing which of the simulations was closest to reality. It then collects the parameter values that produce the accurate simulations. The resulting distributions are the Bayesian posterior distributions for these parameters. They represent exactly our updated knowledge of these parameters. The peak of the distribution gives us the most likely parameter value, and the spread gives us the uncertainty around this value. This method of Bayesian inference is well established. It's called approximate Bayesian computation and has been used in many fields such as psychology, biology, ecology, etc. So how does this help us with the meta-analysis? Well, let's look at the example from before where we tried to find out the dog-caused increase in joy, θ1, from multiple datasets. Here are the datasets. If there isn't already such a rule, we start by creating a new behavior rule which says that if the child is currently playing with a dog, then their joy is increased by θ1. Next, we use this agent to make simulations of the systems that generated our datasets. By fitting the simulated systems to the data from the real systems, we get a posterior for θ1 from each of the simulation models. We can use standard Bayesian statistics to combine the posterior distributions to a single updated distribution. This resulting distribution contains the learnings from all of the datasets and was obtained using a rigorous statistical formalism. It is the probability distribution of θ1 given all the data and all the rules. This is how we can combine the knowledge gained from both studies and real-world datasets. We can see that the posterior from the study is narrower than the other posteriors. Generally, the posteriors from simple systems with few parameters will be narrower and more informative than those from more complex systems. However, most models will add at least a little information to the final probability distribution. So, the main advantage of using tree of knowledge is that it allows us to make meta-analyses which not only include datasets from studies, but also many different real-world datasets. This has the advantages that we can obtain more accurate results, the results are more generalizable because of the broad range of included datasets, there's less participant bias because this doesn't occur in real-world datasets, and that it allows us to study phenomena for which no good study data exists yet. Also, there are advantages simply due to it being an easy-to-use online platform. The models are explicit and easily readable. You can build upon other people's work and, for example, easily add new datasets to an existing meta-analysis, and your analyses and data are automatically publicly available, which is one of the open science conventions. By adding new behavior rules to agents and learning parameters with more datasets, the users of Tree of Knowledge are building up an increasingly realistic model of a human. This model of a human can then be used to model sociological systems, economic systems, and be used in many of the social sciences. This way, we could have the social sciences collaborating in the shared ambition to create an increasingly realistic model of humans and human systems. I hope you're as excited as I am. Thank you very much.